Good morning, students. When we did this poem in the virtual class, it wasn't very clear, so I'm recording this video. I hope this is going to be much clearer. Okay, you see, this is the mind map of the poem The Plaint of the Camel by Charles Edward Carroll. Now, in this mind map, you can see, students, the main character is the camel, right? About whom the poet speaks, and about whom you can say the poet is speaking on the camel's behalf. It is as though the camel is speaking. The theme in this poem is the humor which lies throughout the poem. That is the way the poet makes the camel complain almost about everything. When we read this poem, we will realize that the camel is unhappy for so many reasons. He is totally unsatisfied with the way he is, and he is forever comparing himself with the other animals and thinking very poorly about him. So, the way the poet actually speaks for him and makes him complain about everything is the humor part. So, you can say that the theme will be the humor. And it is also the animal, the poor camel. We find that most creatures are prized, pampered, and they are all attended to in a very good manner. They are all being taken care of. But the camel is left to thirst and forage. Forage, students, forage means left to feed for himself. And we find that the animal, this poor animal, is actually very, very deprived, or rather, he seems to be very deprived of all the benefits which the other animals are getting. Then we come to the moral of the story, of this poem. The moral over here is very, very, you can say, students, it's very relatable. The poet tells the reader the virtues of being good and successful. He says that most of the time we are comparing ourselves with others, and most of the time we are envious of the others, whereas it should not be so. In the poem, the camel is dissatisfied about himself, and he always feels that the other animals are getting the benefits, rather he is not. Similarly, in our real life also we find that we are forever comparing ourselves with the others. It's like the proverb which says that the grass is always greener on the other side. We always feel that the others are better than us, they look better than us, they get better than us, they are getting the privileges which is not possible for us. In fact, we think about us in a very low manner. Our self-esteem becomes very, very low. And this is the reason for grief, you can say. This is the reason why we become sad about ourselves. So that should not be the case. Rather than looking towards others and being unhappy, we should be happy with what we have, right? This is the moral of the poem. Now we try and understand what the poem was all about. So, good morning once again. Okay, and then we move on to the thought. Success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. Who would know better than you? If you make small efforts every day in studying, then certainly you will find that you will become successful. Then comes the plaint of the camel. This is your topic. This is the name of the poem. Now, plaint, student, the meaning of plaint actually in British English means a complaint made by somebody in the court. But over here, in the literary sense, it means a sad cry or sound. So here it is the sad cry or sound made by the camel. Now we find something about the camel also. The camel is a fascinating animal with special ability like going without food. Something is written about the camel's ability. We find it in the deserts, and in this beautiful poem, in spite of being so useful, the camel is forever thinking that he is not getting the due attention, you can say, as the other animals. Little bit about the poet. Charles Edward Carroll was an American children's literature author, Can say he's very famous for his poems Sleepy Giant and Developing Window Blind, and certain others also. So you can see that this is the poet who is very famous about all these things. Now about the poem. The poem was written by Charles Edward Carroll, and it is a complaint of a camel. First, it complains about the food that is given to us in comparison to the others. In the first stanza, students, you will find that he is thinking that he is taken for granted, where all the others are getting importance, where all the others are getting good food, he is simply not paid attention at all. It's like when other animals are getting biscuits and crackers, nobody thinks about his digestion. Nobody thinks about his digestion means nobody thinks about what would be suitable for him. He's a camel, so he can eat anything. It's like he is just taken for granted. Okay. And this is the very nature of humans also. We never learn to appreciate what we have, but we are forever complaining about what we don't have. Then we find, students, in the first stanza, like it is mentioned, it compares itself with canary birds, parrots, and poodles. Poodles are dogs. It's a breed of dog. As to what all given for eating, and says that because it can digest anything, it over here means the camel. Because the camel can digest anything, no particular diet is followed. Anything is given to him. Nobody cares what he likes, nobody cares what he dislikes. It's like just because he has to be alive, so anything is given to him. Now we find in the second stanza, it complains about his sleeping place also. And it compares itself with cats, chickens, puppies. See, all these are domestic animals, cats, chickens, puppies. But you find that all of us, we really take care. Those of you who have pets at home, you also provide a special place for them, a special bed for them. But for the camel, well, the camel, any place is okay. That means only a ground needs to be there, and the camel is put over there. Now, there is no particular place for him. Then the third stanza, we find that it complains about the dwelling place, like it compares itself with lambs, coops, kittens again, and there is no dwelling place, there is no staying place for the camel. In the fourth stanza, it complains about how people use it as a beast of burden. Beast of burden means the beast or the animal to carry loads. Any amount of load is put on him. Nobody rides a giraffe, ox, rabbit, or fox, but everybody rides a camel. Very heavy loads are put on him, very heavy people sit on him. So, nobody is thinking about the camel. Nobody feels that the camel might be feeling tired. Nobody thinks that the camel might not want to carry the load. He is simply a beast of burden. He is simply an animal who's meant to carry all. Then in the last, it also complains about his features. He also feels that he's made of all bumps and humps, whereas all the other animals like the snake, the weasel, alligator, they have all sleek features. They all can curl up in any place where they wish. But about himself, he feels that he's so bumpy, so humpy, that it is rather very ugly looking. So in a way, he thinks, very lowly about himself. Now we come to the theme. Well, the real theme is the humor, students. The humor throughout the poem lies in the way the poet makes the camel complain about almost everything. We really find that there is not one point about which the camel is happy. Either his looks or his food or the place where he stays, he feels very, very lowly, and that really makes us smile. And that is the humor throughout. Then of course the animals, because there are some who are very pampered, who are very tended, that means who are taken care of. But the camel is a beast of burden, left to thirst, left to forage, to feed for himself. We find that there are certain animals who are given too much of importance, but there are certain animals who are given least of importance. So this becomes your theme. Now the poem follows a particular rhyme scheme, students. Do you understand what rhyme means? Well, a rhyme scheme is the pattern of rhymes. You can say it's actually the musical. If you remember, students, when we did God Save the Beetle, we followed onomatopoeia, isn't it? Onomatopoeia was the sound words. That means if you are actually putting, if you really want to create a sound, then you give certain words which actually create sounds, right? Similarly, students, we find that the poem is written, the literary, you can say, it is the literary beauty of the poem. When it is written with a rhyme scheme. Rhyme scheme over here means it is a pattern of rhymes at the end of each line of a poem or song. Now, when we read the poem, we realize that sometimes the last word of a sentence, okay, the last word of the sentence has a tone, has a sound which matches with the last word of the next sentence. Now, there you can say that rhyme is actually verbal music, like the line ends with roses, poses, view, hue. So, you can see the rhyme. The sounds are very similar. So, rhyming words together give a musical chime of a sound, and this is one reason why rhyme is so much used in poetry. Over here, also, you will find that the pattern which is followed is AB, AB like. See, canary birds feed on sugar and seed. Parrots have crackers to crunch. This is seed and crunch are two different. And as for the poodles, they tell me the noodle. That is again rhyming with seed. Have chicken and cream for their lunch. Now, crunch and lunch become similar. They sound similar, right? But there's never a question about my digestion. So, the next two lines rhyme question and digestion. So, likewise, it follows a pattern. Either it could be AB, AB, it could be A, it could be AC, AC, likewise, right? So, over here we find that this poem also follows a particular rhyme. The sound word over here, remember that onomatopoeic words that we did? The sound word, the same word is crunch. Now, when we use the word crunch in poem, then a typical sound word is created. It's as though you can hear that sound. If you crack a biscuit, the crunch word which comes, or if you crack anything which is very crunchy, right? Like a packet of chips, then the word crunch which you make, that itself is a sound which means that the thing is very crispy. And then comes the moral. Of course, we find that we people like the poet, we people like the camel is forever complaining about everything, and we are never happy about ourselves. The poet reminds us that we need to be better versions of ourselves rather than looking towards others and feeling envious of others. So, the reason why we suffer from insecurities is that we compare ourselves with others. So, rather than comparing ourselves, we should say positive, show gratitude, and compassion. With this, we come to an end, and the next session, hopefully, it's going to be a better virtual class where I will be explaining you the poem as well. Thank you.